I'm turning 74 next week. I feel like I did
Look
when I
great.
was 40. I go out for 40-mile bike rides. I make love to my wife. I'm a healthy guy. So that's priceless. There's nothing that I can put on a higher level than that.
Michael, thank you for coming on, man. I appreciate your message and I appreciate what you're doing. So welcome
Thank
to
you.
Real Talks.
Good to be here with you and your listeners.
So you've been vegan for how long?
Oh my, 1981 was 40 years now. We're in 2021, 40 years. Mhm.
Wow. And why did you start so early? Like what convinced you to go vegan at the time? I would imagine like that there wasn't any or much scientific evidence. People probably thought you were crazy. So why did you decide to do it at such an early stage in the whole vegan movement?
Wow, good questions. You're right. There was not much support. Well, we turn the clock back to 1981. I was a resident in anesthesiology in Vancouver. I was going to be an anesthesiologist. And I found myself on the cardiovascular anesthesia service, dealing with people's hearts and blood vessels. And day after day, I'm putting people to sleep and I'm watching surgeons open up their chest and open up the arteries in their heart and pull this yellow guck out of their arteries called atherosclerosis. And there were already studies in the literature showing this was largely the fat of the animals these people were eating. And my dad died of clogged arteries. I know I've got those genes, and I knew if I kept eating the ham sandwiches and the corned beef that he was eating, I was going to wind up in that operating table with that Stryker cell going up my sternum. And I sure didn't want that. I saw those folks, they woke up. So I was getting a message from the operating room, from the medical side, change to a plant-based diet, because there were already studies in the journals showing that a plant-based diet will melt this stuff away out of your arteries. And I knew that as I was getting this message. And so that was my left brain telling me adopt a plant-based diet. And then the right side, the emotional side kicked in a few weeks later when I was out for dinner with another anesthesia resident, and I was pontificating about living a life of nonviolence and spiritual purity while I was polishing off a porterhouse steak at the local Kagan Cleaver Steakhouse. And John looked at me with great compassion and said, that's very nice, Michael, but if you want to get the violence out of your life, you might want to start with that piece of meat on your plate, because in satisfying your desire for the taste of flesh in your mouth, you are paying for the death of the animal and for the next one in line at the slaughterhouse. And as soon as he said that, all the old rationalizations jumped into my head. Well, the animal's dead already, and that's what they raised them for. But before I could get the words out of my lips, the little voice on my shoulder said, he's right. He's right. And I love animals. I did much of my growing up on my uncle's dairy farm in Wisconsin. I know the violence required to put meat on any table. I chopped the heads off chickens. I saw the old dairy cow shot in the head. I know the violence inherent in meat production. And so between what my brain was telling me from the operating room scene and what my heart was telling me about the animals and my complicity in their death, that was it. That was the last meat that I ate. And my body just loved it. Within 12 weeks, a 20-pound spare tire of fat melted off my waist. My high blood pressure went to normal. My high cholesterol went to normal. I felt great waking up in a nice lean body every day. And at that point, I knew I was a lifetime plant eater. And I decided I didn't want to be an anesthesiologist anymore and spend my life putting people to sleep. I'd rather go back to general practice and help them wake up. So I left anesthesia and went back to general practice and started doing nutritional medicine with a plant-based emphasis, which is what I do today. And I became the happiest doctor I know because my patients get healthy. And if you want to know the rest of the story, you mentioned the term vegan. I had never heard the word. I still hadn't at that time. But shortly after, I was home getting dressed, and I had been raised in a Jewish household after World War II. And I had heard the stories of the Holocaust, and I saw the pictures of the lampshades made out of the skins of the Jews. And here I am putting on my leather shoes made of the skins of these animals, my leather belt, and my leather wallet. And it just felt cadaverous and hypocritical. So I went out in the backyard and I dug a hole and I put my leather shoes there, my leather wallet, my leather belt, and filled the hole in. I stepped back and I apologized to the animals. If you don't know, you don't know. But once you know, you got an obligation to act responsibly. So the era of hemp wallets and non-leather shoes began for me, which persists to this day. And one day, shortly after, I was mentioning to a friend of mine the evolution I had gone through, and she says, "Oh, you become a vegan." And I said, I'd never heard the word. But I said, "Oh, okay, I like the sound of it." And so that's how being vegan kind of found me. I had no choice after a while. If I was going to remain in integrity, it just felt so much better not to eat animals and not to pay for their deaths and or wear their skins. And it's felt spiritually lighter ever since. And so that's how I evolved to become talking to you today.
Awesome. And did you read the book Homo Deus?
No.
He talks about how nowadays we all have this one shared religion, that's humanism, which basically is that since we are the species with the highest cognitive power, we believe that all the other species are there to serve us. So why do you think we have adopted this sort of moral theory that puts us at the top of the food chain and we just disregard everything else?
What a profound question. And of course, that's at the root of so many of our problems, the arrogance, the hubris we have. That just because you can do something, does that mean you should? Just because we can kill these animals on an industrial scale, we kill 80 billion living creatures every year on this planet. Do we have a right to do that? And is there no consequences to that? We're so short-sighted. All we know, oh, that steak tastes good in my mouth. That's all, and that's the chapter one and the end of the chapter for most folks. They don't think about where it comes from. They don't think what it does to our bodies. They don't think what it does to the planet. It's, for Homo sapiens, sapiens means wise. The words, if you're sapient, you're wise. Well, wisdom means, someone defined wisdom as not buying at too high a price. That's wisdom. And we don't have that. It's a misnomer to apply that to our species. We're not being wise with our food choices, to say the least. It kills the animals, but it's killing us and killing the planet. So you ask, why do we do this? Again, our species is just focused on short-term gain. We don't have much foresight for long-term consequences. And it's costing us dearly. It's that reptilian part of our brain that we want satisfaction now, and we'll kill anything that gets in our way if we can make ourselves feel better by eating it or having sex with it. The male species looks as he enters the room. Can I eat it or dominate it in some way? And it gets, you create a reptilian world that way. And so we've got a lot of evolution to do, as far as opening our hearts and opening our heads. And we see the rainforest being cut down and the desert spreading. What will it take? I'm afraid what it'll take is the last fish being pulled out of the ocean and the last tree being cut down. And at that point, it's too late. So that's kind of why we're having this conversation, to engender some wisdom in your listeners and all of us, to live more reverently and gently, including what we order for lunch and what we put in that supermarket basket when we're pushing that cart down the aisle and to decide what to bring home to eat. That's where awareness and wisdom have to play a greater and greater role.
And how have you managed to, or what have you seen that has managed to convince a great amount of people? Do you think it's the documentaries that are convincing the most people to turn plant-based? Is it the talks? Is it a little bit of everything? Or is there one thing that is like, okay, this is really working that you've noticed?
Oh, you asked brilliant questions. I would have to say it's everything. Your listeners may not be familiar with the term the zeitgeist, is a German term about just the cultural feeling of the times. And clearly, and as one who's been now observing and participating in the plant-based movement for 40 years, I can see that the zeitgeist has changed, and you see it now. You can go to any restaurant, and there's a vegetarian section on the menu. You go to the supermarket, there are plant-based entrees everywhere, in the dairy case, the meat case. It's clearly happening in the society. Now, why is it happening? For all the reasons you mentioned. There's been some very powerful films have come out that really present the case brilliantly. There's wonderful speakers now. The scientific literature is filled with studies clearly showing that plant-based diets reverse diseases. You get more and more doctors on TV shows and writing books promulgating that message. And people, in my career as a practicing physician, there are so many patients coming to me with diseases that are clearly from the standard Western diet, clogged arteries, high blood pressure, diabetes, autoimmune disease, that when they go to a plant-based diet, these diseases resolve and they go away. All of those contribute to the communal experience, the zeitgeist that is now opening to the wisdom of plant-based diet. And not how many years ago, how many decades, not many. If you said you're vegetarian, you're eating plant-based, you get all sorts of scorn and dismissive looks. Now it's getting to be pretty hip to do this. And the kids of the internet and the young people are very aware. They hate the animals being killed. They are fearful for their environmental future. And the plant-based message has a major role to play in their understanding. So all this is coming together to make a very different zeitgeist in 2021 than I was dealing with back in 1981. And so all these wonderful influences have had an effect, including a podcast like you and I are doing. And I'm so grateful that you have the wisdom to open up to important subjects like this and use this powerful medium to help your listeners and increase their understanding of it as well.
Thanks, Michael. I appreciate your kind words. And I'm very curious because I'm from Venezuela, and obviously we have a more outdated form of thinking when it comes to nutrition. We don't know as much. And for me, like the general feeling is that the older population still really thinks that meat and animal products are healthy. They don't think there's anything wrong with that in terms of health.
Yeah, that's a real issue, of course. And it has to do, again, with us Homo sapien creatures, though there may well be in other creatures as well. But the food that we eat as children, become our comfort foods. We associate it with mother and home and security and all those early influences that really bend our personalities and our preferences for the rest of our lives. And people who are in their 70s that are like me, you have to have compassion. Your mother didn't know. My mother didn't know. They were giving us the food that they were told that their mother gave them. You want your child to grow big and strong, give them the best nutrition in their minds. And the government, with their basic 4 food groups, is telling them red meat makes your boys grow big and strong. And so that's what they gave us. And that's it. I developed a taste for steak. I could have eaten it every night. I did many times. And that's just got imprinted in us because we didn't know any better. But now we know better. But it's a monumental task. It's like turning an ocean liner to try and get all of society, because as you well know, there's this massive economic juggernaut behind the meat industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the dairy industry. They all have such powerful sway in Washington, where the policies are made and the money is doled out in subsidies, that it's, the juggernaut keeps rolling along. But that's Goliath that we've got to tame. We don't have to kill him. We just got to educate him and get him on our side. Because we could. That money could go to helping the farmers grow something else. You don't have to run dairy cows and beef cattle on your land. Grow broccoli, grow fruit trees, grow industrial hemp, let the forest come back, pay these people to do something more beneficial with the land. And it could be done. We just need the insight, foresight, and political will to make it happen.
It's just a matter of changing the subsidies a bit, because the reason I believe, I'm not, well versed in the subject, but the reason that, for example, we have chicken that's so cheap, meat that's so cheap, is because of the subsidies, right?
It's all government subsidized. If a beef burger really sold for what it really cost to produce it, if those meat producers really had to pay for the water they had to irrigate the alfalfa to feed the animals, which they don't, if they had to pay to repair the soil erosion and the environmental destruction that the cattle grazing creates, all the pesticides and herbicide damage from sprayed on the feed corn and the soybeans that are shoveled into these animals, if they had to pay for all this, these burgers would cost $80 a piece. They call $100 a piece, and as well they should. And people would eat it once a year, which is all you should be eating, that kind of stuff. So you're right. The economics are skewed, and that's damaging everyone. It's a false economy. When you go in and buy that burger for $2, it's an illusion. That's your tax money artificially lowering that price, but it's coming at the cost of the soils in the Midwest pouring into the Mississippi River, the wells running dry, the atmosphere getting hotter. That's really what's behind that phony $2 cheeseburger.
And from your 40 years as a vegan, what have been the biggest pros and cons?
These pros and cons. Boy, the pros, I'm turning 74 next week. I feel like I look great. I was 40. I go out for 40-mile bike rides. I make love to my wife. I'm a healthy guy. So that's priceless. There's nothing that I can put on a higher level than that. But there's a spiritual peace when I lay my head on the pillow at night. I know I haven't paid for any animals getting their throat cut or environmental destruction, etc. So the physical and the spiritual uplift have been absolutely priceless. They outweigh any negatives. The negatives, a few wisecracks from my relatives and some getting into some arguments online with some paleo folks, etc. But by and large, the truth is the truth, and it's so powerful as far as everything from animal welfare to the physical health to the environment. There's no real argument. The inconvenience of it, back in the 80s, the only health foods, there was powdered soy milk that you had to add to water and stir up and dissolve. That was about it. Well, that's gloriously transformed into all these wonderful burgers and beefs and things we have now today. So that's fallen away as a con. So by and large, just a frustration that people can't see on a widespread level the power of this, the beauty of this, the necessity of this, and knowing that millions of animals had their throats cut today and their lives ended absolutely needlessly. That ongoing tragedy tears at my heart. That's been a con. And the waste and the suffering that's happening in the hundreds of thousands of nameless sheds on hillsides across America, filled with hundreds of millions of cows and pigs and chickens in misery, and knowing they're there tonight, they'll be there tomorrow night, that this is accepted and goes on. The communal blindness that we turn to that's a real con. That's on a lot of levels. It's a con. And so yeah, those are the bring downs, but we're working to make those bring ups. If we stop eating the stuff and stop paying for it, those sheds will disappear. And that's the key, the power that people have. And when they bring out their credit card, it changes everything. And by choosing the bean chili instead of the beef chili, it's all gets big ass, and everything that implies, choosing the plant-based options over the animal-based, everything will get better at that point if we go to a plant-based diet.
But it's so easy to, look the other way because we're so detached from the source. People don't even know what goes on in there. Aside from a couple of documentaries, I'm sure like less than 1% of people have actually gone to a slaughterhouse or something like that.
Absolutely. And of course, that's exactly the way the animal slaughter industries want it. That's why it's stunning that, we kill 1 billion animals in America alone every year, and you never see it. They are invisible.
You don't even smell it.
You can't even smell it. What a profound conjuring trick that the meat industry does. As I said, there are these anonymous sheds. You drive through the countryside, way up on the hillside. There's a couple of blank sheds up there. You have no idea what's up there. That's just the way they want it. So it's really remarkable the brilliant ignorance that the animal industries have foisted upon the public. As I think Paul McCartney said, if slaughterhouses had glass walls, we'd all be vegetarians. If people really knew and saw not only what goes on in there, but what they are paying for. I say in my lectures, I say, every time you're in the restaurant and you turn to the waitress or the waiter person and you say, I'll have the beef, I'll have the chicken, I'll have the veal, I'll have the lamb. Every time you say those words, your children's world gets a little hotter, a little drier, a little deader, and more animals face this horrible terror just because you think it's your choice of what you want to put on your tongue that night. But we need the wider perspective here. What is the true cost to the animals, to the planet, to my health and the future by my food choices? And we're plant-eating creatures. We just need to honor that anatomy and eat accordingly.
Yeah, our teeth are not made to chew,
No, we've got these small. We're
cows.
plant-eating hominids. We've got claws. We've got fingers on our hands, not claws. We've got long intestines for digesting fiber. We've got small mouths with rotary jaws and flat, grinding molar teeth, great for eating starchy roots and tubers and fruits, but not for tearing into the flesh of a buffalo. Well, we don't have those kind of teeth. We have basically the same digestive anatomy that our gorilla and bonobo cousins have. And they're up in the trees tonight eating leaves and fruits and passing these big bowel movements and not developing diabetes. And that's basically what we should be doing as well. We eat a plant-based meal, our digestive system works gloriously and we don't develop these diseases.
And when did humanity start to have animals in like every single meal? When did that start to happen?
That's profound, because I'm certainly not implying we've always been vegan. Back in the Garden of Eden, as the Bible says, we did eat leaves and fruits, etc. But fairy tales aside, clearly, our ancient foraging ancestors on the savanna of Africa 1 million years ago, we were basically starch-eating creatures. Most of the calories brought into the Paleolithic camps were roots and tubers gathered by the women, and wild grasses and berries and grains, etc. That was our basic fuel. But I'm certain that if they found a rotting zebra carcass in the sun, we would scavenge that for the fat and the protein. Fair enough. And then man learned to hunt. But most hunts were unsuccessful. Most times the guys came back empty-handed. If they did drag a carcass back to camp, it rotted within a few days. We had no refrigeration. It's not like we ate meat at every meal. It was a rarity. You had it once a week, maybe. And I'm saying, listen, even today, you don't have to be vegan, but get your meat eating down to once a week, not 3 times a day. So which brings us back to your question. When did we start eating meat with every meal, which we do now.
Mhm.
Bacon and eggs for breakfast, cheeseburgers for lunch, chicken for dinner. There's got to be a piece of animal muscle in the center of every plate, or else you scream at the wait person, "Where's my protein?" So when did this happen? Mostly after World War II, when we got so atrociously rich, we could afford to be having meat at every meal. And we thought not at all about the consequences. And, right after World War II, you see the incidence of heart attacks and strokes and diabetes and cancers, head for the sky. And a flesh-based meal, a flesh-based diet, and I'm saying it's based on animal flesh, 3 times a day. That's your ticket to those kind of diseases. So it was a 20th century phenomenon. I have to remind myself we're not in the 20th century anymore, but it was a 20th century phenomenon. Back in the 16th, 17th, 1800s, nobody could afford meat 3 times a day. It wasn't available 3 times a day. It's a modern era phenomenon. And again, our wealth did not buy us health and happiness. It bought us disease and suffering. And now we got to be wise enough to see it was too high a price, and we need to recalibrate what true healthy eating really is, and it's plant-based.
And do you think that everyone could follow a plant-based diet, or are there some people that really can't deviate from the traditional way of eating because they have a condition or they're just allergic? I don't know. Can everyone go plant-based?
Profound question. And this might be a bit of a long answer, but the answer, yes, everybody can potentially eat a completely plant-based diet. I've delivered hundreds of babies, but almost 24 of them were to vegan parents. I've watched 24 vegan parents raise their child on a plant-based diet. They grow up big and strong and healthy and bright, and have healthy vegan kids on their own. I've watched that happen. So there's no question that diet nutritionally can certainly be adequate. And most everyone has no problem transitioning to a plant-based diet, to order the pasta primavera with vegetables instead of the pasta with the meatballs. It's not that big a sacrifice, and most people have no problem. The flavors in the spaghetti sauce. It's not in the meat itself. Now, I have to admit, yes, there are people say, I tried to be a vegan once. I did it for a few weeks. My energy level went down. I didn't feel good. My bowels weren't working. I got all gassy, and I went back to eating meat, and I feel better. So I'm a carnivore. Don't talk to me about vegan, schmegan stuff. And I've heard that so often that I have to say, either these folks are all just trying to drive Dr. Klaper nuts, or they're trying to tell us something. And I think what we're seeing is this. Talk about, our unfortunate societal viewings of nutrition. At age 6 months, where the baby is still nursing at the mother's breast, at 6 months of age, with all the love in the mother's heart, and again, your mother didn't know, my mother didn't know, but with all the love in the parents' hearts, at age 6 months, that jar of baby chicken, baby lamb, baby turkey is opened. And at that point, 3 times a day, animal flesh is slathered on that infant's intestinal tract, all for the first years of their lives. By age 3, they're in McDonald's eating their Happy Meals. They're off to a flesh-based diet, and they eat animal flesh 3 times a day through childhood, through adolescence, through puberty, through their teen years, their 20s, their 30s. Well, you eat animal flesh 3 times a day for 30 years, and your body is going to adjust to that in many ways. And one way is that when you're biting into the muscle of an animal, and let's be honest, that's what a steak is, that's what chicken breasts are, it's the muscle of these animals. A whole bunch of muscle-related nutrients floods into your bloodstream: carnitine, creatine, fragments of myoglobin, etc. Now, your body, the human body, can make these molecules, and it does. But if these molecules related to muscles are coming in pre-formed 3 times a day in your diet, well, what are your genes going to do that make your own carnitine? Well, they're going to down-regulate. They don't want too much carnitine and too much creatine in your bloodstream. So you'll down-regulate your own production of these molecules, which is fine if your diet is continually supplying these. Now it's not so fine because it's also that diet is damaging your arteries and making you obese and diabetic. But as far as straight nutrition goes, what happens, we become dependent on these muscle-related nutrients. And then in, say, at age 35, you see a film like Forks Over Knives, or you read Dr. Esselstyn's book or Dr. McDougall's book, and the plant-based light goes on, and you change your plant-based diet. Well, now all those preformed carnitine, creatine, muscle-related nutrients, boom, they're gone. Now you got to make your own right now. And you've got to, your genes and enzymes got to gear up your own production of these molecules. And most people can do this and they don't have a problem. But there's going to be a significant fraction, 10%, 20% of people whose genes may take a few months to gear up and unblock themselves. And during that time, you draw down on your own carnitine, creatine, and those are shorthand for hundreds of muscle-related nutrients. And you don't feel so good, and your energy level goes down. And then you eat some meat, and all those muscle-related nutrients flood into your tissues. No, I feel great. Wow, I'm a carnivore. But and that's what people relate to, and why they say, everybody can't do this. But I say, wait a minute. Yeah, fair enough. That's what we see. But what are we really looking at? This is not normal human physiology. This is an acquired dependency that was created by feeding a human infant animal flesh 3 times a day since infancy. Yep, you can create a dependency on this stuff, but so what? You can create a dependency on cocaine and heroin and all sorts of things. That doesn't mean it's natural, doesn't mean that it's healthy, or doesn't mean that it's right on any level. And I think that's what we're looking at here, is this dependency fostered from feeding flesh-based diets early in life. So what's to do? I see some people, most people can make the transition instantly, but there's a significant portion who may need to take a few months. They may need to eat animal flesh once or twice a week for X number of months and slowly fade it out and increase the interval in between eating. Instead of eating it twice a week, you eat it once a week, and then a couple times a month, and then once a month. So it takes you 6 months, 12 months, 18 months to phase out. Fine, that's okay. Just stay comfortable, but keep working at it. You'll eventually get there. So maybe there's more than your question deserved there, but I think that's really what we're looking at, those folks who, I've tried this and it didn't work for me. Perseverance is the key. If you really know in your heart and your mind it's the right thing to do, keep working at it, and treat the meat that you eat like it's medicinal, and it's something you can fade out like most other medications.
Yeah, not everyone can quit cold turkey. Some people need to go.
Speak. Yeah, cold
some people need to go slowly.
Right.
And do you have like a sort of guide or advice that you always give whenever someone asks you, how can I start being vegan? Like, what nutrients should I get as supplements? Like, how does that work? Because I started like 4 months ago, and I realized, okay, I was missing this nutrient, this other nutrient, and I had to get supplements. But is there, like, I wish I had, a sort of guide, like, you need to get this supplement, and eat this, and that. Do you have a sort of
sure, absolutely.
guide like
There's
that?
so many wonderful books now on beginning vegan nutrition, and that spells it out for you really easy. There's really, the simplest thing, start with one meal a day. So just make a vegan breakfast. You can keep the other ones non-vegan for a while, but get a good vegan breakfast, oatmeal with berries in it and some oat milk or hemp milk over it. Great, that works. And when I eat breakfast, that's my breakfast. And I just load it up with blueberries and raspberries and throw some ground hemp seeds in there for omega-3s and some plant-based milk. Yay. So get a vegan breakfast going. And then a vegan lunch, a soup and a salad and a sandwich. That works. So make up a nice hearty vegetable soup, throw everything in there vegetable-wise. You can buy bags of cut-up organic vegetables in the freezer case at every supermarket. Open a bag of those veggies, throw them in the pot, throw some quinoa and lentils in there and some flavorings, and make a nice hearty soup. Then you can eat off of that for 3 days. There's all these wonderful sandwiches you can make. Put lots of some whole grain bread, lots of veggies in there. And here's where some of those plant-based meats go. But a slab of tofu or tempeh or hummus, very nice filler for a sandwich. And have a salad, like Dr. Furman says, the salad is the main dish. You need those fresh veggies every day with no oil dressing. And dinners, there's a whole international cuisine of plant that you can make plant-based. You make it Italian style, Mexican chilies, Asian stir fries, Indian curries. There's no end of traditions that make wonderful vegan meals. And so that will supply the macronutrients, the proteins and the calories, a day of eating, like I just mentioned. Now, but you're talking about the micronutrients. The only one that you really gotta take care of is vitamin B12. It's an essential vitamin. We need it for healthy brains and spinal cords and blood. It's made by microbes that live in the soil. And when we're living with our caveman ancestors, it wasn't a problem. You pull up a tuber out of the ground and you eat it with all the dirt clinging on the outside. And you would get vitamin B12 in the microbes living in the surface soil on the veggie there. And when you got thirsty, you found the nearest stream and plopped down and drank stream water, there'd be B12 in the stream water from the microbes. And so when we were living earth-connected lives, we didn't need B12 supplements. But welcome to the 21st century. Nobody's eating unwashed vegetables. Nobody's drinking out of streams. We've chlorinated the drinking water. And for that reason, the, quote, natural sources of vitamin B12 have dropped out of the plant eater's life. So if you're going to be a plant eater, you should get eat something with vitamin B12 in it, at least 3 times a week. They add it to products like soy milk and nutritional yeast. You can find it in processed foods, but also you can just get a bottle of these vitamin B12 sublingual tablets that dissolve under your tongue, and it's called methylcobalamin or cyanocobalamin. And 3 times a week, just put one of those under your tongue, and you're home free. That's all you really, really need to do. Now, that said, there are some other ones, vitamin D, because we all live inside these days. We're not out in the sun where the sunlight on our skin is making vitamin D. So it's probably a good idea to take 2,000 international units of vitamin D every day. And there can be a couple of vitamins and minerals that can be a little challenging for vegans to get. Zinc, vitamin, well, even K2, your gut bacteria will make that. Zinc and iodine are the two, iodine for your thyroid and zinc for your skin and your muscles. Now those are in whole grains, they are in sea vegetables, and any of the books on beginning vegan health. There's a good one called Nourish, Nourish, by Brenda Davis, who's a dietitian. All these books will tell you about this. But to make a long story short, get a good vegan multivitamin. And 3 times a week, just take that, and that'll cover the zinc and the iodine and the vitamin D. And usually the B12, they should all be in the vegan multivitamin. And the purists may say, aha, see, it's not a complete diet. But welcome to the 21st century. Nothing is natural here. We're not eating the foods that our ancestors ate. This is not the natural world in any way, shape, or form. So rather than making a stance on principle and all of that, the animals that the meat eaters are eating, they're not the same animals that our ancient ancestors ate. They've been bred up to be fat pigs and cows and sheep. So you can't make a stance on, well, that's unnatural if you take a supplement. Just take a supplement, get on with it. The magic is in the whole plant foods. Yeah, and let me just say, because this is a show about overcoming adversity, I tell your listeners, if you are overweight, if you're a man or a woman struggling with your weight, a whole food plant-based diet will produce a lean, trim, healthy body. And if you've got a medical issue, you've got high blood pressure, diabetes, clogged arteries, Crohn's disease, colitis, psoriasis of the skin, when within days of starting to eat a really whole food plant-based diet, like I described, the breakfast, lunch, and dinners, there are lots of soups and salads and steamed greens, etc. It's stunning what we see. Within days, the obesity begins to melt away, the arteries relax and open up, the high blood pressure comes down, the diabetic insulin receptors unclog and diabetes goes away, the sore joints stop hurting, the psoriasis skin clears up, the asthmatic lungs stop wheezing so much without the dairy protein, the migraine headaches get better. And people turn into normal, healthy people who don't need a lot of pills and potions and services of people like me. So it's the most powerful medicine I know. That's why I've been going to the medical schools and telling this to the young medical students. You need to know about this. If you just see patients every 2 months just to raise their doses of beta blockers and metformin and say you ought to lose some weight and come back in 2 months, you'll leave medicine. That's all I hear from my colleagues. My patients are all getting fatter and sicker. They all need stents and bypasses. That's right, doctor. You don't talk to them about what they're eating. That's exactly what you're going to see. But if you send them to the plant-based dietitian and let her show them the videos and read the articles and take them shopping and get them on a plant-based diet, watch that patient transform right before your eyes into a healthy person. It's the highest form of medicine they can practice, but nobody's telling them this, and it's embarrassing. It's outrageous for practicing physicians to look back at the education that is being passed off as fundamental, complete medical education. It's far from complete. So most patients know more about nutrition these days than their doctors do. So that's why we're doing our Moving Medicine Forward initiative, is to get this message into the heads of young medical students. But just in general, what I've said, the whole food plant-based diet is the most powerful medicine that you can enlist for whatever your listeners are struggling with right now. The key is in a healthy plant-based diet.
And I always hear plant-based advocates advocate about how they can cure all these diseases, all these chronic diseases. It could reverse them in a way, but I never hear them talk about like depression, anxiety, and more emotional type of diseases. What's the effect on that for me personally?
You asked beautiful and profound questions here. One of the things that I noticed back in the 1980s and 90s, when I was just new to the game and helping my patients transform their diets to plant-based ones, I was focused on their blood pressure and their cholesterol levels and their blood sugar levels. But it's delightfully frequently, someone said, doc, ever since I started eating this, I feel better. I'm not as angry with my wife. I just feel better getting up in the morning. I'm happier. And I wasn't going to argue with it, but I had no idea why. Well, science marches on, and in the last 10, 15 years, we've become very aware of the tremendous power that lies in what is now called our microbiome, those trillions of organisms that live in our gut, and especially in our colon and lower small intestine. We used to think they were just innocent bystanders and necessary microbes from all the food that we eat. But now we understand they are active players in so much of our health. Our immune system takes its cues from the microbiome. And so much of our neurologic function is influenced by the microbiome. And very importantly, the microbiome is essentially completely determined by the food that we eat. If you eat a bunch of sugar, you're going to summon up sugar-eating microbes in your gut. If you eat a bunch of meat, you're going to summon up carnitine-eating microbes. The food we eat determines the microbes in our gut. It's like the conductor of an orchestra who brings up the woodwinds and tones down the brass. Well, a whole food plant-based diet brings up an assortment of microbes, the Prevotella bacteria and others, that put out their byproducts turn out to be neurotransmitters. They put out dopamine and norepinephrine and serotonin that find their way into our brains, the nervous system. They go up the vagus nerve and through the venous system, and they wind up changing our mood. They change our viewings. They determine food cravings. It's such an exquisite feedback loop. The food we eat determines the microbes in our gut, and the microbes in our gut have a lot to do with choosing the foods that we eat. But they also answer that question I had back in the 80s. Why should he be feeling happier? Because the whole food plant-based diet changed the microbes in his gut, and they changed the neurotransmitters that are going up into the brain. Now, I can't say here, I'm not saying just eat plants and your depression is massively going to lift. If you've got horrible clinical depression, if you're loading your revolver or thinking of jumping off a bridge, yes, you should be eating a plant-based diet, but you definitely should, get some help with that and call the prevention hotline, et cetera. But it's a predictable benefit that there's an emotional improvement as well. And one of the best things, has long been known to lift depression, is physical activity. Go out and move. Just go out for a brisk walk, take a jog, swim. And as that heart rate increases, you pump more oxygenated blood up into your brain. Physical activity is a wonderful antidote for depression. And the whole food plant-based diet will trim your body down, so you'll want to go for that walk and you'll want to go for that run. And it's all of a piece. It's all of a whole here. So go back to our original imperative to be plant-eating hominids, and we'll be happy hominids as well.
Yeah, for sure. I always thought, like, obviously, I wondered if the suffering and those emotions, that anxiety, that depression that probably the cows have and in the dairy industry, etc. I always wondered if that somehow stays in their skin and their muscles in the food that we eat.
I, of course, heard that from my early days getting into vegan awareness, etc. But the scientists in me scoff at, well, how can that really be? The adrenaline is dismantled very quickly. It turns out that may not be so crazy. I won't go into all the science now, but if your listeners look up something called microRNA, and micro DNA. Little fragments of DNA and RNA come out in the breath and as well as in the urine and feces of all of us, of the animals. And as the animals are going into the slaughterhouse and that fear is in the air, microRNA gets transformed into a, if you will, a configuration of fear, and we wind up eating that in the flesh of these animals, and there seems to be a true molecular mechanism by which the fear and terror of those animals does enter our bodies. It's not through the adrenaline per se, but if you look at microRNA, it turns out that may well be true. And it might be another reason why people just feel better when they go to a plant-based diet, because they're not eating all that fear and death, microRNA from the slaughterhouse. So, the lights are flashing all around, and especially when it comes to the environment. Homo sapiens, if you want to be healthy as individuals, stop eating death. Eat a whole food plant-based diet, your arteries and everything will be healthier. And as a species, Homo sapiens, you want to stay on this planet with 8 billion of you must evolve to a plant-based diet where you can't feed a flesh-based meal 3 times a day to 8 billion people. It will totally destroy the planet. One way or the other, the lights are flashing. Evolve your diet to a plant-based one. You have to be 100% vegan. No, we want to eat meat once a week, okay. But no more than that. It's really important. We've got to evolve past our primitive beginnings.
Awesome, Michael. I really enjoyed our conversation. Is there anything you want to promote? Anything else you want to say?
Yes, absolutely. I'll invite your listeners. Go to my YouTube channel, Dr. Klaper, and 3 times a week I post a Q&A there. And if you'd like me to answer questions, send them in. Go to my website, drklaper.com. It's all spelled out, DOCTORKLAPER.com. And we've got lots of articles and videos there. You can follow me on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram. But most important, if you are connected with a medical school, if you have a medical student, if you are on a staff of a hospital or a clinic, and you would like the plant-based message delivered to your colleagues, to medical students, to surgical residents, to anyone, the laboratory folks, anybody you think would benefit from hearing the plant-based message, please contact me through the website. There's space on drklaper.com, and go to click on our initiative, Moving Medicine Forward, and you'll see how to get me to either virtually on Zoom or in person eventually. We hope to speak to your institution. So help us move medicine forward by supporting moving medicine forward. So thank you for letting me get that information out to your listeners.